Good morning, everybody. It's Kim Ernstrom from the RDNA and the IFTDSS team. Everyone's having a good Friday. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We are going to have Bree Schuler present a webinar on the developing treatment alternatives in IFTDSS. It'll be the last of our series of 5 webinars for IFTDSS, and hopefully some of you have attended the previous webinars. If you haven't, we've got all the recordings available on the landing page for IFTDSS, so you can link to them from the landing page. And I'm going to show my screen here in just a second, and just to make sure everybody knows where those are, and then we'll hand it over to Bree. A couple other tidbits as far as some logistics for the webinar. So we're going to keep everybody on mute on listen only mode. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. I'm just showing the Welcome to IFTDSS landing page. And I just want to show everybody. So here on the front page here, where it says register for webinars, we've got all the links to the recorded webinars from the previous 4 weeks. You can also access them from our user support section here. If you click on user support and then webinars and training, it'll take you to what's scheduled, and then the other tab is what's recorded. And you can see those are all the recordings there. You want to go back, and then there's probably some other recordings in here that we did last fall, some introductory stuff. So if you ever need to point somebody to those are always available. Probably be adding some more in the future too. Also, I wanted to mention that the past several webinars, we've had lots of really, really good questions. And I wanted to point out to everybody the support forums. I'm going to go to that right now. What I'm planning on doing is yarding up the questions that we received during the webinars, and I'm going to enter them here into the community forums, into the questions and answer forum. If you haven't looked at this before, we've set this up so people can ask questions and then have conversation back and forth with either the IFTDSS team or other users. So I'm going to pull those questions from the webinars, put them in here, and people can see the question and the answer, and certainly the conversation could continue if we wanted to do that. This community forum is available for anybody to use at any time. So the questions and answers, if you have a question about IFTDSS and you're not sure how to make something work and it's not super urgent, then go ahead and stick your question in here, and we get notified when a new question is posted, and we'll get back to you right away. And then the ideas exchange portion is if you have an idea or you kind of wished IFTDSS did something that it doesn't currently do, you can go ahead and add a statement or a question or an idea into here, and then we'll come back and answer it and try to follow up with you a little bit on if it's on our list for development or what the status might be. So anyway, I just wanted to point out the forums, and this is one that someone had suggested about being able to edit the symbology in the map. And so anyway, we got back and had a little chat about that. So anyway, I will pull the questions again from this webinar and put them into the forum here for everybody. Anyway, just wanted to make sure folks were aware. So with that, again, this is the last of our webinar series. We are going to follow up, hopefully, and do maybe some region-specific webinars here as we get closer to fire season, and I know things are already picking up in the Southwest. But hopefully we'll have some other maybe region-specific webinars available for folks to watch, join, or watch the recording, depending on if you're available or not. So we'll keep you posted on those through the MailChimp mailings and other info from IFTDSS. So let's see. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, Bree is going to run through this example. It's kind of a case study, sort of a summary of all the different parts of IFTDSS that we've gone through in the last 4 weeks. So this will be kind of a straightforward case study on how to use the treatment alternatives option in IFTDSS. But we wanted to also point out there's lots of ways to use that option and that functionality in IFTDSS. So if you had a specific project you're working on and you're maybe not quite sure how to proceed, or maybe you get hung up, or there's a different type of question you want to answer, just let us know and we can help you out, work through another example. Anyway, we just want to, for the matter of time today, we want to kind of keep this one kind of concise and just stick to the case study at hand, but knowing that there's lots of other ways to utilize this part of IFTDSS. So anyway, let's get started on the webinar. If you have questions, you can type them into the question box and I'll go ahead and answer them as we go. And if there's some questions that we want to address right away, I'll chime in and stop Bree for a minute and we'll address that question. And then we can follow up at the end on any other things that come up. So we're going to shoot for about 30 to 40 minutes on the case study and then hopefully have plenty of time for questions as well. So with that, I'm going to change presenters over to Bree Schuler and she will take it away. So Bree, coming your way. Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you are seeing my screen. Like Kim said, I'm going to be running through the Develop Treatment Alternatives module within IFTDSS, and today we're going to do it a little bit different in that I'm actually going to walk through a real-life example of how you would apply this. Like she said, it's a very simple case study, but I think it'll help hopefully conjure some questions by you guys and get you thinking about how maybe you can use this in your day-to-day work. So with that, I'm going to start off with a few slides, and you have to excuse me, I've had a cold, so hopefully that won't interfere too much, but I'm going to start out with some slides to walk through kind of what we're going to do and what we're looking at with this module, and then I'll actually jump into the application and do a demo. Again, looking specifically at the Developing Treatment Alternatives module within the system. And so, first question, why would you use this? Well, we developed this module primarily for folks that do fuels planning type work, people in the field that need to game out maybe some different treatment alternatives on their landscape for projects that they're working on, kind of packaging tools that'll allow the users to create different landscapes that represent different alternatives, different treatment types, maybe evaluating placement of the treatments on the landscape, and then producing some products that basically stratify the data. So it's going to let you compare fire behavior, compare differences in fire behavior between alternatives, and it's actually going to produce some tables and reports, and I've got some screenshots of some of those on this slide of what IFTDSS can produce to help you understand, the effects of different treatments on your landscape, basically. So with that, you approach your project with some goals and objectives in mind, right? Your task, maybe you're tasked with those, maybe you come up with the goals and objectives. In this case, we're going to be looking at a scenario where we've got some different resource objectives that we have to consider as we're walking through and gaming out our different treatment strategies. But that's the starting point. What are the goals and objectives that you're looking at? And then that's going to help guide you through this process. And so, again, with this module, we tried to really package it to where you could come into it and get all of the products that you need, including maps, reports, tables, within one module, within one workflow. So in the past, and this is just my example, in the past, these are the tools that I would have used to produce what now I can produce in IFTDSS within this Develop Treatment Alternatives module. I would have used ArcMap to maybe look at my landscape, maybe look at some different fire behavior outputs I got in SlamMap. I would also be looking at my treatment polygons and maybe drawing my treatment polygons within ArcMap based on my fire behavior outputs. from FlamMap, and then maybe I would take that into Excel and I'd start producing my tables and charts and graphs that I might want to use in a NEPA document, for instance. So, you know, with that, within this Develop Treatment Alternatives module, you can produce all of these things pretty much. There are some limitations, of course, but I'll demonstrate that in this demo. So specific to this demo, this is what kind of the project that I set up. So I've got a screen capture of the map, and we'll look at this within IFTDSS when I get to the demo, but I've got a couple different stands that I'm looking at that make up one treatment unit. You can see on the map there's a small community on this lake. I'm going to be calling this project the Quiver Project because these units are right up against Quiver Lake. You can see the development west of these treatments. And so the overall goal is to reduce potential fire behavior to this community west of Quiver Lake. And I should preface this by saying I sit in northern Minnesota. I worked on the Superior National Forest for many, many years in fuels planning. So this example comes from the boreal forest of northern Minnesota. My objectives specifically are going to be to reduce flame length within the treatment area to under 4 feet across 80 to 100% of the unit, the actual unit. And that I also want to look at reducing my crown fire potential, that's crown and active crown and passive crown fire, to surface fire on at least 80% of the unit, across the unit. And this you can see on the map being my units that I'm honing in on. So that's going to be what we're after with this project. So I'm going to be setting up the project to try to come to a conclusion on whether or not we can meet these objectives with some fuel reduction treatments. So as I'm sure many of you know, it's not as easy as saying, well, we want to meet these objectives, you know, reducing flame length across the unit and, you know, mitigating the risk of crown fire potential on these units. You're typically always going to be working with other resource areas, you know, managing for multiple resource objectives. So for this case study specifically, I'm working with resource specialists where, you know, the wildlife biologist has concern about reducing the canopy of these stands too much, because moose use this habitat for thermal cover. So I have to account for that, right? I have to be thinking about, can I still meet my hazardous fuel reduction objectives, and account for the fact that, you know, we've got a resource specialist that's concerned about moose habitat. There's also sensitive soils within these stands that I need to be thinking about. So maybe that's going to impact whether or not I, you know, put fire within these stands, or, you know, this could lead to seasonality of the treatment of these stands. But something that I need to be thinking about and evaluating as I'm working through and gaming out my different treatment alternatives. Can I meet my hazardous fuel reduction alternative hazardous fuel objectives along with these other, you know, resource needs? And we know that you can't do that all of the time, but what are the trade-offs? And can I maybe provide my resource specialists and my line officer some data to help them understand what the trade-offs are going to be? So with that, I'm going to exit out of here, and we're actually going to jump into IFTDSS, and I'm going to start showing you how I would walk through this case study. See, that's not good. Oh, goodness. Stand by.
Uh-oh.
Right. Let me try QA.
I was able to get to the landing page, Bree. Not sure what's up there.
You?
Let me try. I'll try on my end too, just to double check.
Let me do this real quick.
Nope. Uh-oh. I'm getting I just got an error myself. Huh, okay. That's odd. It just worked a minute ago.
Stand by.
Sorry, everybody. Stand by. Technical difficulties. It wouldn't be a good old-fashioned webinar if we didn't have at least one.
Okay, I'm going to just keep working through on QA, and Kim, let me know if prod comes back up if you can.
Okay, we'll do. I'll slip a note out to the crew too and see if they know about something.
Yes, that would be good. Okay, so this is going to look a little different. I'm actually in our testing, our development environment, so you'll notice that the bar is green across the top, but try not to let that distract you too much. So I'm going to log into IFTDSS, and I'm going to go straight to the cycle because I'm obviously interested in this develop treatment alternatives module. Now keep in mind that you can, within this module, I'm going to be editing landscapes, I'm going to be pulling a land fire layer. You've seen, if you've been in the other webinars or you've played in IFTDSS, you've seen that you can do a lot of the things that I'm going to show you within this module outside of the module. You can use your landscapes that you create and you edit outside of the Develop Treatment Alternatives module within this module. So again, we tried to really build IFTDSS to where you can, you don't have to be kind of cordoned off to one area to do certain things. So hopefully that doesn't trip folks up, but definitely ask questions if you're getting hung up on that piece of it. Okay, so I'm in my Develop Treatment Alternatives workflow. I've opened the split screen map view because I need to be able to use the map, and I want to be able to see what I'm doing in terms of setting up my project in the tab view. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is an added step I wasn't planning on doing here, but since production is not up, I'm going to add my shapefile. I can find it here. That has the treatment unit that I need in it. And I'm going to save the shapefile. I think you guys have seen this in other webinars. I have not created a work folder in my workspace for this project. So what I'm doing is I'm uploading the shapefile that has the treatment units that I need to look at in it, and I'm going to save it to the Quiver project folder in my workspace. So I'm creating the Quiver folder, and I'm going to save it and add it to my map. And so it should save it, and it should ask me if I want to actually, okay, so it zoomed me in, so it didn't ask me that, which is good. I'm just going to clean up a couple things here. And now I'm going to zoom in to my units of interest, which are these two here. I'm going to go ahead and switch my base map because I like to be able to see the aerial imagery. And I'm going to use the feature that allows me to extract a couple polygons from a bigger data set for use within my workflow. So I want to be able to pull the treatments or the units out that I want to use as a mask for landscape editing, but I also want to be able to use these treatments for my reports because I want to summarize the data within the treatment unit boundary rather than across my entire landscape. So the first step again is going to be to create my subset. So I need to create a shapefile that represents just these two treatments. So that's what I'm doing now. So you can see here in the attribute table, I use the three dots to the right of my shapefile, and I clicked Create Shapefile Subset. I'm going to close that, and you can see my attribute table lists the shapefile that I am working with, and it's filtered by the map extent, so I'm only seeing the shapefiles that are within this little box here. And I need to select out my treatment unit. So there's one I've selected, and then Control-Shift lets me select the two that I need. So you can see that they're highlighted now on the map. So I want to save the selection as a shapefile. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to name these my Quiver units. And because I've already set up a folder when I uploaded those shapefiles, you can see my Quiver project folder is here in my work folder drop down. So I'm going to select that because I want to save these units there in my workspace so everything's all together. So save and add to map. Okay. So now you can see I've got this subset shapefile. It's a different color. I'm going to close my attribute box, and I'm going to turn off my bigger polygons. Now I've got my polygons that I'm interested in here. You see again the the community of interest and my treatment units. Now I need to create my landscape file because this is what I need to be able to edit to create the different treatment types and to compare. So I'm going to go to, I open my landscape tool, and I'm going to go to the Create New tab, and I'm going to select my draw box. And I'm going to keep this landscape very small. I mean, for the purpose of this demo, it'll help the models run more quickly. So I've got my landscape's 199 acres, so it's going to be pull land fire data for this box that encompasses my treatment unit. I'm going to go with the 2014 land fire data, and I'm going to name this my Quiver landscape. And again, I'm going to save it in my Quiver folder. Let's get that landscape going. So a couple things while we're waiting for this landscape to build. A couple things about the Develop Treatment Alternatives module. So you're going to work through the tabs from left to right. So the initial step is going to be to pick your landscape. Now something that's really important to know is that the landscapes available in the Select Landscape drop-down box for this module are only going to be your unedited, what we have said called out-of-the-box landscape or landfire landscape. So these are going to be the original landscape that you pulled, whether it was in, you were in the map studio or you were in the landscape evaluation module within the cycle. It's going to list all of those landscapes here. So every single out-of-the-box landfire landscape that you have in your workspace is going to be available to select here. We refer to this landscape within the Develop Treatment Alternatives module as your zero landscape because that's your starting point. You don't have to, once you get into the module, you don't have to use your zero landscape or your starting landscape for a compare report. You could be comparing only edited landscapes, but I think it's really important to understand that these are going to be the unedited landscapes. It's your jumping off point. Let's see if that, so my Quiver landscape has finished building. I'm going to add it to my map. And so here we go. So you can see that, I've got a lot of TU5 in here. I still don't know what my starting fire behavior is going to be off of this, but we'll see that once I start running the models within this workflow. So with that, I'm going to look for my Quiver landscape. Again, that's my jumping off point. That's my starting point. That all of the landscapes that I'm going to be editing and comparing are based off of. And I also want to select an area of interest. Now, an area of interest is different than a mask within IFTDSS. An area of interest is primarily used to create reports based on an area of interest. So an area of interest could be a very large NEPA project boundary. An area of interest in this case are my Quiver units. So I'm going to select those because I really only want to see the statistics of my fire behavior outputs in my landscape file within these treatment units. I don't want to see it for the box that I drew my landscape. That doesn't really give me the context that I need to determine if I'm going to meet my objectives. So your area of interest can be a variety of things. It could be a prescribed burn unit. It could be multiple prescribed burn units. So it can be really anything. And it has to fall within your landscape, your starting landscape boundary, or extent. So with that, I've got my project set up, got my starting landscape, and I've got my treatment units that are going to help me understand what my statistics are once I run the models. The next thing I want to do is I want to start creating my different treatment scenarios. So again, I've got my quiver landscape. I'm starting with that one, and I'm going to use the default fuel treatment disturbance edit rules for this this demo. So again, you know, I talked about the different resource management objectives that we're thinking about with this project. So I know I want to have an alternative that's no treatment, and that's what I'm going to compare my treated landscapes against. So that's going to be represented just by my out-of-the-box land fire data, this quiver landscape. But I also want to edit the landscape to represent my, what I'm going to call alternative 2, which is going to be my fuel reduction objective. So if I, as the fuels planner, really wanted to do what I thought was best, to, you know, the best treatment to reduce the hazard on this landscape, I would want to do some sort of a thinning and remove the slash. So I'm going to say for my fuel reduction alternative 2 objective, I'm going to do a heavy thinning, and I'm going to burn the slash that comes from that thinning to reduce the surface fuel load. And so I'm going to pick 1 year post-treatment. That's what I'm going to evaluate. You know, right after the treatment, what is, you know, what are the impacts going to be? And again, I'm going to be applying these edits just to the quiver treatment units. So I've got my edit rule set up. I'm going to add the rule. And so we see that it's listing my rule for my first alternative, or it's going to be my alternative 2, and I need to name that landscape. So quiver, and it's going to be alt 2, and this is my fuel reduction objective. I'm going to save that. So now it's going to start working on building that landscape. I also need to create I want to evaluate a landscape that's edited to reflect a treatment that would take into account the soils issues and the moose habitat issues that have been brought to my attention because through, you know, other resource specialists. So, you know, can I meet my fuel reduction objectives and account for the fact that we're managing for moose habitat and we've got some soils issues? So with that, I'm going to choose my thin, my moderate thin, and if I hover over this, this moderate thin lap and scatter says that I'm going to thin the stand to about 45% to present, and you can read the rest there. But so that's the one I'm going to choose. It's a moderate thin. I'm going to leave the slash on site to account for the fact that there's some soil issues. The moderate thin will account for the fact that we do want to leave quite a bit of canopy for moose habitat. And I'm going to also do 1 year on that. And then I'm going to, again, I need to choose my units because I want to apply this edit just to my treatment units. And I'm going to add that rule, which it lists up above, and I'm going to name that, landscape alt 3, and this is my moose soils, just to help me remember. And I'm going to save that. So now I've got my quiver landscape, which is my unaltered landscape. So that's going to represent the no action or no treatment alternative. I've got an alternative representing a fuel reduction, you know, a heavier treatment with slash removal, and I've got my alternative to account for the issues with that we have with managing for multiple resource objectives. And so you can see that one's still building, but the other 2 have built. So the next step, while we're waiting for those landscapes to build, is going to be to enter my model inputs, right? So we have to establish what we want the landscape fire behavior model, what conditions we want to evaluate these alternatives under. For me, and for the purpose of this exercise, I want to see what the impacts are going to be to my fire behavior output under more of like an extreme 97th percentile type weather conditions. Now, as many of you know, if you've been in IFTDSS or you've been in the other on the other webinars, we have the Auto 97 landscape evaluation module that will run your landscape under 97th percentile conditions that the system determines. So, you know, you could determine these conditions outside of the system in Fire Family Plus, or just from your own knowledge, of course, but I used the 97th percentile conditions for this landscape that I had run prior to now to be my jumping off point. And so with that, I am going to make some adjustments though. So the 97th, Auto 97th run that IFTDSS did for this landscape put my wind at 20 miles per hour, and I'm going to bump it down a little bit from that, just based on experience. My experience here, the wind direction I'm going to stick with, which was 270. I'm leaving my crown fire inputs as is, and then I'm going to use the fuel moistures that the Auto 97 determined, because I think they're fairly accurate for this area and for these conditions. So, you know, just a note on this is that you can, at this point, you can't change once you run your compare reports in this module. You can't alter the inputs. You can go into your workspace and delete some of the old runs or runs off of inputs that maybe you didn't like and rerun it, but that you do have to take that extra step to delete some of those files from your workspace to make adjustments to your inputs. So that's something that we'd like to modify in the future, so it's a little bit easier to make adjustments to your inputs for rerunning. So I guess my point being is that it's best to come into this being pretty solid on what you know, fuel moisture and weather conditions you want to run your compare project with. And so you can do that outside of the system or outside of this module in the playground, or again, you can experiment with the Auto 97 run. Okay, so I've got my weather and fuel moisture conditions set up, and I'm going to save those inputs. And then I'm going to go to my Run tab, and you can see here all of my landscapes have built. They're all listed. So these are the ones I created in the Edit tab. It gives auto names my runs, and I'm going to leave those as is. But if you wanted to make adjustments to your run names, I actually might go ahead for this run name, put Alt1. And then I'm going to run these models. So I'm just going to click Run Model on each of these. And we'll let that run. And while we're letting that run, I'm going to show you a couple different things that you can be doing to evaluate some of the edits that were made between your different treatment alternatives. So I'm going to add my edited landscapes, my other alternatives. So you can see here I've got the 3 added to my map. Let me zoom out a little bit. Kim, maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or anything has come up.
Let's see, the only question we've had so far is just about asking if the spatial planning data layers that we have in IFTDSS are available in IFTDSS. You know, so you can look at your objectives and strategic planning and such. We have not added those layers to IFTDSS yet, but we are working with our IFTDSS folks to sync up as much of the data that's in IFTDSS as we can. So it's kind of on our list to do. Hopefully that's something we can look into this spring, and knowing that, yeah, those strategic objectives certainly would tie to a lot of this fuels planning work as well. So that's a great question, and we'll follow up with folks as we add new data layers and let them know when they're available in the system. But so far, that's the only question we've had. Actually, I got one more that just came in here. Rich wants to know where you obtained the 97th percentile values for the, for the 97th. So I'll let you go ahead and answer that one, Bree.
So 97th percentile run, that comes from the Auto 97th workflow, and I'll show you that. Kim, remind me at the very end. I don't want to jump out of this right now, but I can show you at the end where you get the Auto 97th run and where you can view those automated conditions. Okay, so my models all ran already. That landscape's fairly small, so they ran pretty fast, which is great. So you can see here in the run tab, my run status, they're all complete. So we're ready to go with compare. But just real quick, I want to show you how you can use the slider or the swipe tool to evaluate the edits that you made between your, I can get this right, between your original landscape and your, why is this not working? And your edited landscapes. I might do this in the, okay, I'm going to come back to this once we get to the actual compare grids. So I'm going to move on. We'll come back to this. So my models have run, my landscapes have created, my models have run under the preset conditions that I had set up in the input tab. And now when I go to the compare tab, this is where the fun stuff starts. This is where you can actually start producing the difference grids on the map and your compare reports with tables and charts and maps, all of these products that you can use to help evaluate these different alternatives. So a couple things to note again here that are very important with the compare module is that you can see as I clicked these, it's numbering them. So I clicked 1 and 2. Right now you can only compare 2 landscapes. You can only compare 2 fire behavior outputs. We would like to change that in the future to where you can compare, many to 1. Right now it's 2, so it's numbering them. So the first one that I picked, the one that's labeled 1, is going to be the starting point. The 2 is actually what I'm comparing against. So again, my quiver landscape, and you can see here it's notated with a 0. If you remember in the first tab, I referred to that starting landscape as your landscape 0. For me, this is my no action alternative, so my untreated landscape. And I want to see what the impact was to my fuel reduction treatment, was to that original landscape. So you want to make sure that the landscape you're comparing against is always 2. Now I can switch these around to where I'm comparing, 2 against 3, alternative 3. So then in this case, my alternative 2 is labeled 1 and my alternative 3 is labeled 2. So just so you know, you can do a bunch of different combinations, but for the purposes of this, I want to compare my fuel reduction landscape against my originating landscape. And so, or my no action alternatives. So I've got them selected, and I'm going to go ahead and get the summary reports kicked off for this. So I'm just going to create reports. So it's also going to create an LCP compare, and then your fire behavior compare. I know that I also want to compare my alternative 3 landscape and fire behavior output to my originating landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and get this compare report going as well. And again, creating report and creating report. So while those are building, let's go back to, okay, stand by here a sec. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to my map. I'm going to go and turn these off. And I am going to, I want to view these compare grids on the map. So if I click, again, setting it up to where I'm comparing my alternative 2 against my originating landscape and click compare on map, and this takes a little bit for these difference grids to show up. We'll let that work. It's going to open up my, my layers list. Let's zoom out a little bit. And and it's going to show me the first thing that's going to pop up. It's going to default to the landscape change grid. So you can see here that I can look at the, oh, that landscape just does not want to disappear, does it? Stand by here a second. Hey, Kim, have you checked production to see if that's up?
Yeah, I just checked it, and it's still not available. Apparently, there was a timing out issue with the FireNet server. So outside of IFTDSS, unfortunately, their timing was awesome. Anyway,
Okay.
our folks are looking into it, but it's still down. So
okay, I'm gonna set this up again because I had that landscape that didn't want to disappear. Okay, here we go. So again, I want to look at my fuel reduction alternative against my no action alternative, and I click compare on map. And the first thing that should pop up is going to be the landscape difference grid. So it's going to show me for each pixel where I had a change. So this one isn't super exciting. I mean, it shows you it's pre-selected to be the fuel model change. So again, my treatment area, I had a lot of fuel model change basically. So the gray is no change. The red is where there's a change. But some of the other ones that I think are more fun to look at are, say, the canopy cover change. So you can see here the cooler tones are where you have a negative change, and the warmer tones are where you have a positive change. So overall, the fuel reduction alternative reduced the canopy cover quite a bit across this treatment area. Let's see, we can look at let's see what the canopy bulk density did for this. So it looks like I had quite a bit of a decrease, again, across these treatment units. A few areas where we had some increases in canopy bulk density, and so you can use the identify tool if you want to drill down more on why, what were the changes and maybe why those changes happened. So here, if I use the identify tool, it's actually going to show me for each of my LCP characteristics where I had increases and where I had decreases. So for this specific point, the fuel model, again, it's based on this, probably went from I think it went from a TEU or TL fuel model to a GRAS. So it had, on that scale, it had a decrease of 41, which really doesn't tell you too much. The ones that are more interesting are, say, the canopy cover, again, where I had a 26% decrease, and so on and so forth. So this is where you can kind of poke around and see where your changes were occurring. But let's get to the meat of this, which is that we want to look at what are our fire behavior outputs. That's what going back to our objectives, we needed to, decrease flame lengths quite a bit on this landscape. So here we can see that we had quite a significant decrease or change in flame length. So, the darker blue is representing where I had at least a negative, at least a 25-foot decrease in my flame lengths from pre-treatment to post-treatment. Crown fire activity was another one we were looking at, and with that, you can see again, and this one is done in steps, so we have low, moderate, high decreases and low, moderate, high increases, and the help content explains this in more detail if you want to look at that. But here again, we saw that overall we had a decrease in crown fire activity based on this treatment. And then we can do the same with the alternative 3, and compare what did how close to meeting our objectives did we get with this alternative. And so if I want to compare those on the map and evaluate that, I can do that too. Again, it takes a little bit to pop those in. So let's go straight to our model output and see if we can see just any differences right out of the gates, visually. Looks like we had some pretty good decreases in flame length for this alternative as well. Let's look at our crown fire activity. And this looks actually pretty similar to the other one. So it looks like overall we're, looking pretty good in terms of being able to meet objectives, for both of these. But let's actually look at that in terms of the numbers, right? Going back to my alternative 2, and I'm going to click compare and summary report again, and now these are available to view. So I've got the blue hyperlinks here. So let's look at the fire behavior summary report. So these reports, if you're not familiar or haven't seen these, are all downloadable. So if I click this button in the upper right-hand corner, it's going to download this entire report. So it's going to give me my statistics for all of the 5 fire behavior output components. You can see here it also lists, it's got a header that lists my, my inputs, so we can track on those within the report. Each of these individual charts, tables, graphs are also downloadable as JPEGs, I think PNG and PDF. If you click on this button here, it's going to give you those options. So, in this case, if I just wanted to use this this bar chart for, say, a NEPA project or something, I can just pop this out as a JPEG and put it into an external document. So that's just kind of a side note on the reports. But basically, again, this is the quantitative data that I need to be able to say, am I meeting my objectives with this alternative? So for the fuel reduction alternative, this bar chart is showing me where my trade-offs were with this. So for the quiver landscape, my alternative 1, my no action, I had quite a bit of distribution of my flame lengths in that treatment unit under those 97th percentile conditions above 4 feet, with almost 50% in the greater than 25-foot category. Post-treatment, you can see that I've exchanged a lot of those really high flame lengths for these lower flame lengths, which is what I'm after. So had quite a bit of reduction in flame length based on that treatment. If I want the hard data, this is where I can get that. So it's giving me my pixel counts for both landscapes. And again, this is within the area of interest. It's not across the entire landscape extent. It's within that polygon. Representing the treatments. It shows me my acres of distribution for the different flame length categories, and then the percent. And so the percent is really what I'm after to meet my goals. And I think our target was for flame length was trying to get at least 80% of the treatment unit within a flame length category that was under 4 feet. And you can see here very clearly that this treatment is going to meet that objective here because I've got 100% in an under 4-foot flame length category. Some other products in these compare reports are pie charts, so really kind of quick visual of showing, whether you had, reductions of distribution in certain bins or not. And then this chart, actually, this bar chart shows difference, is like a difference bar chart. So this relates to what we see in the difference grids on the map. So it's kind of showing you where between your no action alternative and your action alternatives, where you have percent increases and decreases for each bin. And so I'm showing you flame length, but we've also got rate of spread. We've got heat per unit area. If you click on these two, it'll pop you straight to the one that you're interested in. So crown fire was one that we were looking at too. And here, if we look at the difference chart, you can see that we had quite a significant increase in surface fire and decreases in our passive and active fire, which is what we were wanting to see with this alternative. So you can do the same thing and look at the same compare reports with the other alternative. I'm not going to do that now since we're short on time. I am going to go back to my presentation to show you how I consolidated the data to display or to show what the trade-offs are between the different treatment types and the different alternatives. So we looked at these products. But here I just kind of made a simple table listing my different alternatives and what the treatments were for each alternative, and then showed what my results were. So for the no action alternative, we had 19% of that area was exhibiting less than 4-foot flame lengths, and we wanted to move that up to a higher percentage with our treatments. And so for the fuel reduction treatment, we were able to achieve 100% of that treatment area actually moved into bins that were under 4-foot flame lengths, exhibiting that type of fire behavior. If we were to look at the alternative where we were accounting for the fact that we were managing for multiple resource objectives, we didn't quite hit the target, but we did, we did see a decrease in those flame length categories that we were looking to mitigate through the treatment. So we didn't quite meet our objective, but we did see some positive movement there. Same with the crown fire activity category and that objective, where in the no action alternative, 43% of the landscape was showing surface fire. We wanted that to move up to 80% or greater, and we found that with both alternatives we were meeting that objective. So, does this alternative meet the objectives for flame length and crown fire activity? The no action, it doesn't. The fuel reduction, we were able to meet both resource objectives, or both fuel reduction objectives, and with the alternative 3, we did not meet the flame length objective, but we did meet the crown to surface fire objective. So, yeah, so that's I guess what I would use. Again, this is a very simple way to walk through this and look at this, but hopefully this was helpful for you guys to understand what this tool does, and maybe you have some different ideas of how you can use it in your day-to-day. So before we jump back to questions, I do want to show where the Auto 97th, that was a question that came up. So you get to the Auto 97th report through this landscape summary. So you're in landscape evaluation and you click landscape summary, and I can enter my landscapes that I was just working with, so Quiver landscape, and request a report, and that's going to create this Auto 97 fire behavior report. There's a lot of information on this in the help, so I would steer you that way if you have more questions, or reach out to us. So with that, Kim, I know we've got about 5 minutes or so. Are there questions?
Yeah, thanks, Bree. That was great, and thanks for the quick shift over to the development system there. Sorry, everybody, for that little hiccup. So let's see, a couple other questions that have come in since we had the last one. Let's see here. Let me just read through these a little bit. Rich had a follow-up question okay, Rich, I'm guessing this is to a follow-up question to the 97th percentile. You asked, where do you enter the target, 80%? I'm guessing you're meaning the target for percentile, I believe. And right now in IFTDSS, we only have the 97th. It's programmed just to run the 97th percentile. So if you wanted to do an 80th percentile, you'd have to do that outside of IFTDSS in Fire Family Plus, and then get those values and enter them manually. We don't have the ability to adjust the choices of percentile right now, and hopefully in the future we might be able to, but right now it's just 97th. Let's see, another question we had was, let's see, where do we find the definition for heavy or moderate thinning in the disturbance rules? So, Bree, do you want to show the help topic real quick on the limb fire lookup rules there, to show how to get to that technical info?
Yep, I'll show that. I also want to show, because I don't think I touched on, but we have, if you go, you can split the screen, so you can show full screen maps, or you can go, the split screen to then full screen tab. And when you go to the full screen tab view, by using these buttons up here, we do have some helpful text and some helpful guidance information that will change as you walk through the tabs. So you can see as I'm changing tabs, it's going to give you some information. And then if you click Learn More, let's go back to the landscape edit. If you go to Learn More, it's going to take you, oops, I'm on QA, so that's why it's doing that. Let me go to this. So from here you can, and she wanted to know about the landscape editing, right?
Yeah, and just so we had two questions. One about where to find the definition of heavy or moderate thinning, and then also the breakdown of, just the other parts of the Landfire lookup rules.
So if you go, if you use go into the help content, we do have a lot of information about the disturbance rules and kind of the differences between those. I think there's links to even more technical documentation on how those were developed. I think that'll be your best place to find the information you're looking for. But if you don't find it, reach out to us. See here we've got some different descriptions, a little bit more detailed description of what each of the treatments represent.
Let's see, a few other questions. Thanks, Bree. Yeah, and just to let folks know, we do have a ton of help within the online help system there, all kinds of examples. One of the questions we had earlier were, how to find a step-by-step maybe tutorial on how to go through kind of what Bree went through today. And definitely in the help, if you look under the strategic planning part, you will see a couple different tutorials that walk you through the development of treatment alternatives and how to walk through those tabs. So definitely check the help for us. We'd love to get feedback on it. So if you have any feedback on the help, we always like to hear that. Rich, follow-up from Rich was, what was the target? The 80% he was asking about was meaning the target objectives for your Quiver project. You said it at 80%. He's just asking where did 80% come from?
And 80% is more of what I brought to the system. It's my, when I'm working with, my resource specialist and using my forest plan, that's something that came from that. So it's not necessarily something that you set in the system. It's just what what you come to the system with in terms of your objectives. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's something that was discussed with your resource folks outside of or the beginning of the planning phases probably for this project, right?
Right. I see another question in there about Sean had a question about what the treatments are changing to the data, so what's happening in the example of canopy bulk density. And so with the compare module, you can also compare landscapes. I think I'd mentioned it, but I didn't show it to you guys. And so this is the landscape compare report. And I'm looking at my fuel reduction landscape against my no action alternative. And this shows me the distribution in this example of canopy bulk density. So where I see my the edits happening or the changes happening. So you can see where, we had more more acreage, more distribution in the higher canopy bulk density categories, pre-treatment, post-treatment. We saw a lot of that shifting into these lower bins. So that's where you would find that. It's got a different compare report for each of the different LCP characteristics.
And then a follow-up to that too is if you're actually looking for the lookup table. So Landfire developed these lookup tables when they were looking at disturbance and how to edit and update the actual Landfire data when different disturbances occurred. So the lookup tables that they used to convert one fuel model to another those lookup tables are available in that technical documentation in the help. So if you want to see how they converted things in the background, you can look at their look at that technical documentation, and it'll kind of show you how the table was set up. So a lot of that's in there. And if you have even more detailed information, you can always contact the Landfire folks, as they're using these rules as they move forward with their new remap exercise and stuff.
I see a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, about stacking treatments on top of each other, modeling a mechanical treatment, and then a prescribed burn on top of that, and being able to look at those rules sort of stacked on top.
And yes, you can stack treatments. Again, I'd refer you to the help content, because there's some details with that. Well, help content, and I think that was discussed on the landscape editing webinar that we did a couple back that's recorded. So I would suggest going back to those to look at it. But you can do that. There's just some intricacies to that that would be worth kind of looking into as you do something like that. But yes, you can.
Let's see. Oh, another question. Will we be in Missoula next month at the Fire Continuum Conference? And the answer is yes, actually. Most of our team will be up there. We're actually hosting a workshop at the conference. I think it's on that Monday when the rest of the workshops are all going on at the same time. And we'll also be there during the week. We have a presentation we're going to give on IFTDSS, and we also have a poster. So if anybody is attending that conference, please come see us, drop into the workshop, or to our discussion, and always happy to sit down on the side for a little bit and visit about things. That would be great. We'd love to do that. So I think we are at the top of the hour, and thank you guys for all your great questions. I really do appreciate it. I know there's a lot going on in the background of some of this, and if you have further questions, or you get to a point where you get some outputs and you want to discuss them a little bit, don't hesitate to contact us. That's what we're here for. Feel free to use that user forum also, like I showed you at the beginning, and that's a good way for other users to chime in as well. They might have similar questions, or might have an experience where something worked out well for them, and they want to share a similar, just idea that you might have. So we're trying to get folks to use those forums and keep the discussion going. And if you have suggestions for us, it's another great place to throw a suggestion. If you'd love to see if you just do something in the future, please go ahead and use that. I'm going to take the questions, like I said at the beginning, from this webinar and put them in the forum for folks to see the question and the answer. So we could always have additional discussion there. But we always look forward to hearing from folks. We can't build IFTDSS and make it better unless you tell us, how it's working for you. So please give us feedback. We're wide open to that. With that, I think we'll wrap it up. Like I said, this is the last in the series. We'll have this recorded and posted on the landing page, and also in the webinar section of the application. And if you have other things come up that you'd like demonstrations on, just hit us up. We'll do our best to fit you in. And if there's other new webinars coming up in the next couple months, look for something in your inbox, and we'll keep you posted on what's new and happening in the world of IFTDSS. So thanks, Bree. That was really great. Great example, and we hope everybody has a great rest of their Friday and a really good weekend.